This is a full story. Kitten wishes you all a happy and enjoyable story. That day, I went back to the office as usual, but received a jaw-dropping photo on my phone. In the photo, my wife Haley was tightly hugging the male secretary from the company. At first, I didn't pay much attention, because Haley had shown me a company photo. Amidst a group of handsome guys, the male secretary was exceptionally plain, with dark skin and an unremarkable appearance. She had complained about him countless times. I've never seen someone so stupid. He can't do anything right. He's ugly and doesn't take care of himself, which affects the company's image. Her disdainful tone was still fresh in my memory, but later, she fought with his ex-wife over him and was detained for 10 days. After the detention period, I went to pick up Haley. I also saw her secretary, Tony, at the police station entrance. The two of them walked out of the police station together, and as soon as Tony saw me, he immediately moved to the other side. I ignored him. Haley came out of the police station and immediately rushed to me, hugging me tightly. "Rocky, I missed you so much." My gaze moved past Haley's shoulder to look at Tony. He was still staring at us and called out, "Haley." Haley's body stiffened for a moment. She grabbed my hand, not looking at him, and walked towards the sidewalk to hail a cab. "Let's go home first. Do you want to eat at home or go out?" Haley. Tony followed, repeatedly calling Haley's name, as if his name had been a constant barrier between Haley and me for the past 4 years. Haley still ignored him, only tightening her grip on my hand. "Shall we stop by the market and get some crabs? You love them the most." "Haley," Tony continued to call. "Why are you so clueless? It's not that I haven't heard you. I'm deliberately ignoring you. Can you stop following us? My husband is here. Are you shameless or what?" Haley, unable to tolerate it any longer, turned around and yelled at Tony. Tony stood there, looking at Haley with deep affection. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay and give you a gold-plated cross." He opened his hand, showing a bright red string with a cross on it. "I'll say it again. I only intervened to avoid you causing trouble in the company and affecting its image. It has nothing to do with you." Haley seemed to lose control of her emotions, yelling before dragging me into the car. Tony did not give up, persistently running after our car. The driver asked us, "The man behind seems to be looking for you. Should I stop?" Haley, a bit impatient, said, "No need. If he wants to follow, let him." After shouting, she pulled my hand and playfully said, "Let's buy some steak too. Do you want black pepper steak or ribeye?" It seemed like she was seriously discussing the meal with me, but she didn't realize that her eyes were repeatedly glancing at the rearview mirror, and her hand was unconsciously rubbing my hand. This was a subconscious action she did when she was anxious. I also looked at the rearview mirror, and Tony was still persistently running behind our car. Probably due to the urgency, he suddenly tripped and fell. "Stop the car," Haley shouted. The car hadn't stopped yet when the door on the side was already opened. Haley ran towards Tony, not even bothering to close the door properly. In the rearview mirror, Haley helped Tony, who had fallen on the ground, to get up. Tony seemed to say something to her, then suddenly hugged her. Haley struggled a bit, but eventually let him hold her. I looked away and closed the open car door. "Driver, let's go." 10 days ago, when I received that phone call, I vaguely sensed that something had changed between Haley and me. I was at work when I suddenly received a call from Haley's colleague. "Haley's in trouble, Rocky. Come quickly." My heart sank, and I asked my boss for leave and rushed to Haley's company. When I arrived, I found Haley, Tony, and another woman in a chaotic tangle. The woman was desperately pulling at Haley's hair. Haley tried to fight back but was helpless, while Tony kept asking the woman to let go, making the situation very chaotic. Eventually, Tony lost his temper and kicked the woman to the ground. The woman hit the back of her head, causing it to bleed, just as the police arrived. The beaten woman loudly accused Haley of being a mistress and seducing her fiancé. She also claimed that Tony and Haley had teamed up to attack her. The farce ended with all three being taken to the police station. I stood among the crowd, watching Tony closely assisting Haley towards the police car. Actually, during their scuffle, I had tried to call Haley's name, but she seemed not to hear. I wanted to step in, but Tony kept pushing me away. I didn't know if it was intentional or not. In the end, before Haley got on the police car, one of her closest employees shouted, "Haley, Rocky's here." Haley turned and saw me, looking very anxious. She tried to run towards me, but was restrained by the police. She could only shout, "Rocky, wait for me. I'll explain when I get out." Many eyes were on me, and I felt like a clown. In the past, no matter how out of control Haley was, she would calm down when I appeared. But now, the person with her was Tony, the Tony she had complained about for 4 years in front of me. Tony had been Haley's male assistant for 4 years. In the first year he was hired, Haley and I weren't married yet, just dating, and Tony had a fiancée at the time. During that first year, I often heard Haley cursing at him. He can't even grasp simple data scraping, despite graduating from from college. How did he even graduate? I can't stand having such a clueless and image-unconscious male assistant. I'll inform HR to fire him tomorrow, but Tony stayed on. In the second year, Haley and I got married. Tony wasn't on the guest list for the wedding. After the wedding, while Haley was showering, I unintentionally saw her phone left on the table with a message from Tony. I hesitated but decided to open it. Tony had sent a message, "Haley, I called off the engagement with her today. I didn't understand why the assistant's personal matters about canceling an engagement needed to be reported to his superior, especially on the day Haley and I got married." Haley came out of the bathroom. I held up the phone and asked her, "Why did Tony tell you he called off the engagement?" Haley was also at a loss for words at the time. How would I know? He's either bored or crazy. She took the phone from me, glanced at the chat, and tossed it aside, saying disdainfully, "He's average looking, which is fine, but his taste is so, well, forget it." His fiancée was extravagant, spending money they didn't have on luxury brands. When she ran out of money, she'd come to the office all day long, making a mess of things. Seeing her so dismissive, I didn't think much of Tony at the time, but things seemed to quietly change. It was in Tony's third year at the company, one evening, that I received a message from one of Haley's colleagues. "Rocky, you should pay attention to him." In the photo I saw, Haley was embracing Tony. Haley had shown me group photos of their colleagues before. Tony was plain, with dark skin, as average as could be. She had complained about him countless times to me. "He's the dumbest person I've ever met. Can't do anything right. He's unattractive and doesn't care about his appearance, affecting the company's image." Haley had been pursued by others. She graduated from a prestigious school, was beautiful, and had a good job. There were no shortages of people with high looks and good temperaments chasing her. She didn't care about any of them. After firmly rejecting them, she would hold me and say, "My husband is the best." Of course, my own conditions were indeed good. From a good family background, graduated from a prestigious university, with a job and appearance that matched hers. So I thought there was no way she would be interested in Tony. And before this, Haley had reported to me that at their company's dinner, they played Truth or Dare. I thought that this was her punishment after losing, but I still remembered this. So later, I also went to Haley's company. Tony was indeed as he appeared in the photo, not caring about his dress, dark-skinned. When he came over to pour tea for me, he even spilled it on the table. "Sorry, it wasn't intentional." Haley saw this and scolded him. "Clumsy, can't even do such a small thing right. Get out." Tony disappeared from my sight. All along, Tony was the one who got scolded. He was timid, average, without any sparkle, the most indistinct face in the public eye, lacking the least bit of a man's boldness. I thought Haley genuinely disliked him. But why did Haley start getting involved with Tony in the fourth year? I understood what had happened. The person who got beaten was Tony's fiancée Serena, who had already called off the engagement, owing money from loans she used for luxury items, and came to find Tony for money. Tony refused, so she slapped Tony across the face, swelling his face. She even made Tony kneel down, without any dignity. Haley came out to mediate when she found out. Serena had a hunch that her relationship with Tony wasn't simple and accused Haley of being the third party, demanding money from Haley. Haley told her not to talk nonsense, and Serena immediately hit her. When Tony saw Haley being hit, he also hit Serena. Things evolved into what I saw when I arrived. I still remembered that Haley said she would explain when she came out, but instead of explaining, she left me to see Tony and even wore the gold-plated cross he gave her. I sat alone in the car, feeling choked up. When I got home, the food I had prepared was still on the table. This meal was supposed to welcome Haley back, but now it seemed unnecessary. I sat at the dining table from dawn to dusk, watching the dishes that had once looked appetizing turn unappetizing. But I never saw Haley. I lay down to rest, and Haley didn't come back until very late. She came over and hugged me, softly calling my name, "Rocky." I kept my eyes closed, pretending to be asleep. She went into the bathroom. I opened my eyes and saw the gold-plated cross on her wrist. Haley came out of the bathroom and her phone rang. Thinking I was already asleep, she answered in a hushed voice in the room. "What's the matter?" The bedroom was dim and quiet, and I could hear the voice on the other end of the phone. It was Jack, Haley's colleague and friend. "Tony resigned to keep this from affecting you. Apparently, his ex-fiancée was bothering him over this. He likes you. I can't believe you don't see it. He's done so much for you. Treat him well." Haley was silent for a long time, long enough to make me think she had hung up the phone. Then I heard her say, "Understood." The other half of the bed sank. like. Haley lay down as well. Usually, she would snuggle into my arms and ask me to hold her while sleeping. Now, we lay back to back, with a gap between us like a trench, unbridgeable. Her phone stayed lit all night. In the morning, after Haley left, I didn't go to work. My stomach was feeling uneasy, so I took a sick day and went to the hospital. There, I coincidentally met Haley's friend Jack. He saw me too. "Let's have a cup of coffee," I said. Jack spoke frankly. "No need for coffee. I know what you want to ask about Tony, right? Tony isn't as handsome as you, doesn't come from as wealthy a family, isn't as accomplished as you, but he cooks for Haley, helps her handle alcohol. Many times when Haley was feeling down, he was there for her. And all you give Haley is pressure. Her family background isn't as good as yours. She's worried about being looked down upon by your parents, so she works hard, trying to be as capable as a man, forcing herself to become a strong woman. So, instead of asking why, you should reflect on yourself first." I found these words absurd. Yes, my family background is better than Haley's, but my parents never looked down on her in the slightest. They treated her like their own daughter. Later, they even gave her substantial support at work, both financially and through their connections. It can be said that without my parents' support, Haley wouldn't have achieved her current success. But now, she actually complains about all this being pressure? My heart felt incredibly stifled. Driving home from the hospital, when I arrived, Haley happened to be on the phone. When she saw me, there was an obvious sense of guilt on her face, almost immediately turning to the balcony to answer the call. A few minutes later, she came back in, looking annoyed. The new assistant called, bothering me with trivial matters, but I heard it. What she said was resumes, job search. And the only one who needs a job now is Tony. The last time she left the police station, under pressure, Haley fired him. But I didn't expect Tony's resume to end up at my company. When the HR department saw his resume, they even praised it. "This person's resume is really well done." At first glance at the resume, I knew it was done by Haley. The color scheme and layout, every detail reflected her personal style. Haley's resume was exceptionally well done. I initially drafted all my resumes myself, but she helped polish and refine them. At that time, I joked, "Shouldn't you start a side business helping others polish resumes? It must be profitable." She replied with a smile, "My time is precious. Besides your resume, I don't have time to look at others." I had a thought in my mind. When I returned the resume to the recruitment staff, I casually said, "He looks pretty good." Listeners were aware. That's how Tony ended up in our company. He still wore ordinary t-shirts and jeans to work, with a red gold-plated cross on his wrist, exactly like Haley's. When he saw me, he didn't seem very surprised, just greeted me, "Mr. Bai." I glanced at him. Later, we met in the pantry, Tony and I, along with Miss Alice, who was keen on introducing people to each other. "Tony, do you still not have a girlfriend? Let me introduce someone to you. Quite wealthy." Tony stuttered a bit, wanting to say he didn't need it. But when he saw me come in, his attitude changed, suddenly smiling and agreeing, "Thank you, Miss Alice. I'll consider meeting her." Suddenly, I felt things weren't that simple. Sure enough, during dinner that evening, Haley played with her phone distractedly while eating. Unexpectedly, she slammed her phone on the table in anger. Is a man no good without a woman? Going on blind dates every day? I thought of the conversation between Tony and Miss Alice in the pantry. Without asking who she was referring to, I simply replied, "It's normal to go on blind dates at the right age when unmarried. Why are you so angry?" Haley choked for a moment, picked up some food for me, then abruptly changed the subject. "Eat more vegetables. They're fresh." Around 10 o'clock that night, Haley's phone rang. At that time, we were watching a movie together in the living room, and her phone was on the coffee table. As soon as it lit up, I immediately saw the word Tony. Haley awkwardly touched her nose and hung up the phone, saying, "Why call me at this late hour? Are you crazy?" While saying this, she reached out and silenced her phone, then put it back in her pocket as if nothing had happened. She continued to sit on the sofa with me as if nothing was wrong, watching the movie. A little over 10 minutes later, she suddenly stood up. "I just remembered I have an email to deal with today. You watch, I'll go handle it." I just calmly nodded, Because our study had special soundproofing, Haley never closed the door when she worked inside. She once said, "I'm afraid I won't hear you calling me." But now the study door was closed. A few minutes later, the door was suddenly pushed open forcefully. Haley held her phone, glaring at me with restrained anger. "I've told you before, there's nothing between Tony and me. Why do you have to do this?" I didn't understand. What did I do? You know exactly what. With that, she slammed the door and left the house. I don't understand. I haven't done anything, so why should I bear this unwarranted anger? Following behind Haley, we went out all the way to the bar, where I saw Tony squatting by the roadside. Today, he seemed different than usual, deliberately dressed up, no longer in a t-shirt and jeans, but in a black suit, with his hair styled back, looking more spirited. When Haley got out of the car, he immediately stood up and ran towards her. Without a word, word. He embraced her. Tony looked very angry. I shouldn't have come to find you so late, but that woman insulted me, saying she despises me for being poor, and even asked how much money it would take for me to be kept by her. Haley frowned, gently patting his back, comforting him not to pay attention to those hurtful words. The scene of the two embracing was sweet yet piercing to me. I watched this scene as if I were forcibly nailed to the spot, my heart growing cold. I called out to her, "Haley." Both of them turned their heads towards me at the same time. Tony squinted his eyes for a moment, then hurriedly spoke. "Don't misunderstand. There's nothing between me and Little Snow. I'm just furious that woman insulted me like that, saying she could support me financially just because she thinks I look decent." When Haley heard these words, her eyes instantly turned cold. She's always been sensitive about her background. When I first took her home to meet my parents, my mom looked a bit uneasy when she heard about her background. Later, Haley heard my mom say things like her family background isn't great, so she's particularly sensitive about it. But in reality, she didn't hear the whole conversation back then. My mom did mention her background wasn't great, but she also praised her for being hardworking under such conditions. Otherwise, how could I have married her? And later she received so much support. But she remembered all those bad things, and she's been bothered by them until now. So now Haley thinks Tony and she are the same kind of people, and I'm categorized with that blind date woman? Is this the blind date person you introduced to him? You rich people always think you're superior and then insult people with money, right? I suddenly understood why she was so angry tonight. She's angry at Tony for going on blind dates, and she's angry at me for introducing Tony to a crappy woman. She's even more angry now that Tony's being bullied. But she got it wrong. It wasn't me who introduced Tony to the blind date. She shouldn't be angry with me. My chest is so tight. I take a deep breath, just want to explain. He didn't introduce me. I wanted to know her, Tony said again. I know the company is talking about Serena because of you helping me. You're not happy with that. If I have a girlfriend, you won't be in trouble because of this. Haley said, you don't have to worry about the company's idle talk. You don't have to speak for him. Before he introduced you to the other person, he didn't know their character and insulted you tonight, which is his fault. Haley looked at me. Rocky apologized to Tony. The cold tone of voice seemed to be talking to a stranger. I remember when I first entered the job, an old employee lost data, but to keep the job, he put the blame on me. He was an old oil stick in the workplace, and all the evidence was ready, and everyone thought it was my fault. I was speechless and called Haley to tell her about it. Haley told me not to worry. She could help me with this. Finally, she came over and solved the problem for me. I asked Haley, have you ever suspected me? She shook her head. I will never suspect you. As long as you say no, I believe you. Now I declare again, Haley, I said it wasn't me who introduced him. Tony took advantage of the situation and said, Haley, this has nothing to do with him. I couldn't stand it anymore. Shut up. Enough. Haley yelled at me. Rocky, I'm so disappointed in you. You never lied before. I suddenly felt ridiculous. I should have been good with her. Why would I become like this? Disappointed. I shook my head. Haley, we can't go back, right? Haley noticed my emotions and suddenly felt a little flustered. Rocky, she wanted to come to me. Tony said again, Xiao Shui, you explain to him. I'll go first. Haley heard his voice and stopped. Wait, I'll take you back. Then she turned to me and said, you go back and calm down. I'll come back later. I watched Tony sit in the co-pilot's seat. The car started slowly. Tony rolled down the window and smiled at me. I stood still for a long time and thought a lot. At this moment, I also understand very well that Haley and I can't go back, and the rotten and spoiled feelings I won't take, but I won't make way for them either. Interfering and betraying are not worthy of completeness. A clear plan gradually formed in my mind. I won't lose. Today, Tony coming to work was very different from usual. He had cleaned himself up, wearing a white shirt, and the most eye-catching thing was the watch on his wrist. Because of such a drastic change, colleagues gathered around curiously asking if something good was about to happen. He smiled. No, I just suddenly wanted to change myself. I saw this watch at the mall the day before yesterday. It costs over $20,000. Tony, this change must have come with a hefty price tag. Tony subconsciously lifted his arm, deliberately showing off the watch. It's not my money. Someone else gave it to me. Oh, that someone else must be quite extraordinary. Ordinary people wouldn't give such an expensive gift. They chatted in the pantry while I was grinding coffee by hand, catching every word of their conversation. Seeing I didn't join in, Tony deliberately came over, the watch on his wrist indeed quite dazzling. Mr. Bai, need any help? I gave him a cold look. No, thank you. One by one, the others in the pantry started leaving just him and me. He continued, last night, when Haley dropped me off, I was hungry. When we were cooking together, I got my clothes wet, and I saw it wasn't convenient for her to go back, so I let her stay overnight at my place. But rest assured, Haley slept on the living room sofa, and nothing happened between us. Are you planning to steal her? I said. Tony froze. What? Are you planning to steal Haley? I repeated, looking at him again. Tony hesitated, unsure of what I meant, silently observing me without responding. I went on, but do you think Haley would divorce me? Your family background is average, and you have an ex-wife burdened with debts. Considering your own circumstances, I provoked him. Tony, what confidence do you have to win her over? Tony's face turned red and white with anger. Stop looking down on people like that. You guys rely on your family backgrounds, thinking you're superior. Haley isn't that shallow. Is that so? Then I'll wait and see. I looked at him with a mocking smile, similar to the one he gave me while sitting in the car that day. Haley's guilt over these days has kept her quietly at home. Occasionally, she sneaks to the balcony to answer a few calls, but after each call, she stays at home and doesn't go out. During this time, I haven't mentioned Tony's matter, and Haley doesn't bring it up either. I keep telling myself not to rush. The time isn't right yet. These days, Tony has been glaring at me at work with resentment. It's useless to force someone who doesn't love you to stay by your side. It will only make her more miserable and hate you more. I looked at him expressionlessly. You were the one trying to win her over. If you can't, who's to blame? You. Tony's eyes were fierce, pointing at me. Don't speak too soon. Just you wait. The next day, Tony took sick leave. Around 9 o'clock that evening, Haley's phone kept ringing. She hung up several times, but eventually got up and went to the balcony to answer it. After the call, she looked hurried. Rocky, there's something urgent at work. I need to go back for a while. You don't have to wait for me. Go to bed first. Okay. I watched her hurry out the door and then turn back to continue watching Hachiko, a dog story. About 20 minutes later, I picked up my phone and saw Tony had posted a blog. You are always there. The picture showed him getting in 4 in the hospital, holding hands with someone else, both wearing red gold plated crosses. No faces were shown, but I knew who it was. The new intern commented below the blog, Tony, take care of yourself. P.S. Your girlfriend is so great. She's staying with you late at night for your drip. Tony replied, thanks for your concern, but she's not my girlfriend. She's someone else's wife. The intern said, haha, you're so funny. Unfortunately, Tony wasn't being funny. He was telling the truth. Now Tony is planning to come out openly, trying to force me out. I got up, took the car keys, and went to the hospital. Standing outside the infusion room, I saw Haley resting her eyes on Tony's shoulder. I rubbed my eyes hard, making them look red and swollen. I acted casually when I saw Haley, then surprised her. Haley, didn't you say you were working overtime at the office? Haley paused when she saw me, then pushed Tony away and stood up, stuttering. Rocky, why are you here? I picked up the stomach medicine I had prepared. I just checked the spare medicine box and found out you were out of stomach medicine. Worried that you'd have a stomach ache after overtime, I hurried out to buy some for you. I glanced at Tony, then at her, feeling dejected. Should I not have come? If your stomach hurts, remember to take it. I'll leave now. I put the medicine on the ground and turned to leave. Then I heard footsteps catching up and Tony shouted, Haley! But Haley still ran after me to the outside. Rocky. Haley grabbed me anxiously. I didn't question her, just looked at her firmly. Her expression was panicked, full of guilt and urgency. Rocky, with Tony, nothing happened. I just took care of him as a friend. He was my assistant for 4 years and resigned for my sake. Ethically and logically, I should take care of him, right? My eyes were filled with loneliness. But the first time you wronged me for Tony, and now you lied to me about working overtime, but actually came to accompany Tony for his drip. I even worried about your stomachache and came out late at night to buy medicine for you. You said he accompanied you for 4 years. What about our 8 years together? How am I supposed to believe you? Haley's guilt deepened, even resorting to raising her hand in oath. I swear I will never be alone with Tony again. If such a situation happens again, strike me down, okay? I thought only a fool would believe such an empty promise. That's not what I want. But for now, I'll go along with her. Then you must never lie to me again. That night, Haley didn't stay with Tony, but came home with me. This upset Tony greatly. At the office, he smashed my cup and said, "Who are you to keep Haley from seeing me?" When she was emotionally unstable stable. I was the one there for her, the one who kept her from drinking. She likes me. You have no right to stop her. I sent him the price of the cup, saying, I'm her legal husband. Tony was taken aback, then angrily threatened me. There will be a time when you'll be out of here. I'll be waiting. After that, Tony went mad. Haley refused to see him, so he followed her to our neighborhood and waited downstairs from our apartment. He stood directly beneath my balcony and persistently messaged Haley. Haley, won't you come down to see me? Haley, I really like you. What did I do wrong? Haley, it's so cold down here. I miss you so much. He pursued Haley for a month, but she never met him alone. Haley tried to impress me with her actions. Rocky, I've kept my promise to you. I haven't seen him. I remained silent. As the night grew windier, light rain began to fall. Coming out of my study, I happened to see Haley hurriedly enter the living room from the balcony. When she saw me, she hesitated for a moment, nervously explaining, "It's raining." I was checking if there were clothes to bring in from the balcony. The balcony offered a view of Tony. I didn't call her out. As the rain intensified later that night, I lay down while Haley showered in the bathroom. Her phone kept buzzing. Haley, today is my birthday. I want to celebrate with you. Haley, I won't leave until I see you. The sound of water in the bathroom stopped. I put down my phone and closed my eyes. The bed sank on the other side. Outside, there was a fierce storm, lightning and thunder. After a while, I heard Haley softly call my name. Rocky, are you asleep? I pretended to be asleep and didn't respond. Then she gently lifted the covers and got up, leaving through the bedroom door. I calmly got up and went to the balcony. Tony was really reckless. Even in the heavy rain, he stood under the street lamp, soaking wet. Haley gradually came into view, and Tony saw her too. He immediately hugged her and kissed her. They kissed passionately in the rain, reluctant to part. I watched calmly. Haley didn't come back that night, and I didn't sleep all night. At 1 a.m., Tony posted on his blog, "Though late, love is never too late. Happy birthday to me, and I wish you eternal happiness." The image showed him cutting a cake with another hand, both wearing red gold crucifixes. I liked the post. At 5 a.m., Tony sent me a picture directly. He and Haley lay embraced in bed, half naked. Their lower bodies were covered by the blanket. Tony said, "Who says I can't have her?" I thought I could handle it calmly, but seeing this picture still disgusted me. I messaged my good buddy Bame. "Time to wrap this up. For these past few days, I've been staying at Bame's place." Haley was outside the door. "Can I come in and explain to Rocky? Last night, I just wanted to go downstairs to give Tony an umbrella. I didn't expect him to kiss me directly and ask me to take him home. Afterward, he kept urging me to drink, and after I did, I don't know what happened. I didn't intend to sleep with Tony. Rocky, won't you come out and see me?" This morning, I sent her the picture Tony had sent me. She called me non-stop, like crazy. I didn't answer any of them. Once she calmed down a bit, I finally went out to see her. "Let's get a divorce, Haley," I said straightforwardly. Haley shook her head without hesitation. "No way, Rocky. I won't divorce you. Believe me, I don't like Tony. What happened last night was an accident." Her reaction wasn't surprising. I understand Haley. She would only feel guilty over and over again, but she wouldn't change, much less admit her infidelity in her relationships. And she also understands that most of her current achievements and status are based on my family's resources, so she won't agree to a divorce. I said, "You made a vow last time, saying you wouldn't meet Tony alone again. But what did you do last night?" "Middle of the night, I woke up and saw you weren't there. I thought something happened to you. I called you all night, but your phone was off. I was worried sick, couldn't sleep all night, and what about you? You were sleeping next to Tony. Haley, you've lied to me 3 times. How can I trust you?" Haley urgently wanted to prove herself. "Rocky, trust me one more time. Apart from divorce, I'll do anything you ask." I didn't say anything. Bame tacitly handed over a marital property agreement, forcing him with words, "Talking nonsense won't work unless you sign this agreement." This marital property agreement clearly listed out the division of property between Haley and me after divorce. If I divorce Haley, all our property and shares will belong to me. Simply put, if we divorce, Haley leaves with nothing. But at this moment, Haley desperately wanted to keep me. She thought, as long as we don't divorce, everything would be fine. And as long as we don't divorce, this agreement would never take effect. She believed she would never divorce. So, without hesitation, she signed the agreement. And the other person, Tony, was on cloud 9 at work today. Just as I stepped into the pantry, he followed me in to show off. The photos aren't great, but feel free to take a look. I've said it before, Haley now likes me. It's useless for you to keep her with marriage. You should divorce her soon. I turned to look at him. How do you know I haven't filed for divorce? I played a recording. We should get a divorce, Haley. Rocky, trust me one more time. Apart from divorce, I'll do anything you ask. I brought it up, but there's no way. Haley begged me not to divorce her. After listening to the recording, Tony looked at me angrily. You must have done something again. Still the same. If you're capable, come and take her. I continued to press him. Haley won't divorce me. What can you do in just 4 years compared to my 8 with her? She was just playing around with you for a moment of excitement. When she gets tired of you, she'll just dump you. The only thing she can't forget all these years is her deceased dog. Tony's expression changed instantly. Tony quieted down for almost a month. During this month, he just went to work on time, didn't bother me, and didn't contact Haley. Except for necessary work hours, Haley almost stuck to my side after that day, as if she were trying hard to prove something. But occasionally, she would stare blankly at her phone. Over a month later, Tony suddenly resigned. According to HR, he seemed to have discovered he had cancer and didn't have much time left. That night, Haley didn't come home. The next day, Haley still didn't come home. On the third day, Haley returned. Her face looked worn out. "Rocky, let's get a divorce." I looked at her. "Can I know the reason?" She said, "Tony has cancer and is dying. His only dying wish is to openly be with me, and I want to fulfill it. He's so pitiful. Seeing him is like seeing my past self. Helping him is also redeeming my past." Haley said, "Rocky, let me accompany him through his final days, and then we can remarry, okay?" I suppressed the sarcastic remark I wanted to make and simply said, "Let's go through with the divorce proceedings tomorrow." I went through the divorce proceedings with Haley. The next day, Tony almost couldn't wait to flaunt Haley's divorce certificate and publicly announce with her, "In the end, it's still me and you." Tony arranged to meet me. He didn't look like someone dying of cancer at all. He looked lively and cheerful. "How about that? Isn't it time for you to scram now?" I nodded indifferently. "You win. Congratulations." He said, "Over these years, Haley earned so much money, yet in the divorce, you still get half. You really got a good deal." Feigning surprise, I said, "Who told you Haley and I are divorcing and splitting assets?" Tony paused. "What do you mean?" I said, "Haley willingly left with nothing for you. Isn't that touching?" "Oh, you didn't know yet, because I suggested Haley not tell you about it temporarily." Tony stood up directly and ran home. I heard that he went back and had a big fight with Haley, wanting her to come to me to get the money back. But with legal notarization, the property had already been transferred to my name. How could it be easily given back? Now Haley is just an ordinary white-collar worker who earns a few $1,000s a month with no company shares or any property. Tony's dream of social climbing through her was shattered. He was unwilling and came to make trouble for me, but was stopped firmly by the security guards every time. Using this as an excuse, I also took a long vacation from work to prepare for a trip to relax. However, before leaving, I sent Haley a gift. Evidence that Tony's cancer diagnosis was fake. Tony never had cancer. He simply heard what I said back then about Haley not being able to forget her deceased dog and got an idea. He pretended to have cancer to manipulate Haley's sympathy and force her to divorce me. And I used his scheme against him, indirectly introducing him to someone who could provide a fake cancer diagnosis. From the moment he contacted that doctor, he fell into my trap. Initially, when Haley received the evidence, she was reluctant to believe it and dragged Tony back to the hospital for another checkup. When the diagnosis results came out showing that Tony didn't have cancer, Haley completely broke down. She demanded to know why Tony had lied to her. Tony said, "Because you wouldn't divorce your husband. Because I love you." Enraged, Haley shouted, "You disgusting liar. It's over. I'm breaking up with you." Tony was furious too and slapped her hard. "Don't think I don't know what you're thinking. Do you want to go back to him? Don't even think about it. You belong to me, and you can only be with me till death." After that, Haley was kept under Tony's control, tortured mentally and physically. I also sent a gift to Jack, Haley's friend. I sent evidence of his embezzlement to their company. It was a substantial amount. The company took legal action directly, and he not only had to compensate for the company's losses, but also faced imprisonment. One day in the underground parking lot, a dirty, mad-looking woman suddenly rushed out in front of me. "Rocky." Only then did I realize it was Haley. Who could have imagined that the once campus beauty Haley had turned into this crazy woman before my eyes? She kept apologizing to me. "I know I was wrong. I was bewitched before, deceived by Tony. I shouldn't have sympathized with him, shouldn't have betrayed you. Sorry, Rocky, really sorry. Can we remarry?" She had spun such an ideal scenario. "It's impossible." I turned and walked away. Suddenly, she went crazy and shouted behind me, "Rocky, are you really that heartless? We've been together for 8 years. You can just forget it like that. What do these 8 years mean to you?" I found it ridiculous. Who betrayed this relationship first? Who was unfaithful in this relationship? I said, "Consider me unlucky." Haley was caught by Tony again. This time, she was tortured even more severely by Tony. Finally, unable to bear it, when Tony wasn't paying attention, she jumped out of the window. During the rescue, they found multiple fractures and soft tissue injuries on her body. Even her kidneys and other organs were ruptured. Even if she survived, she would have to live with a urine bag for the rest of her life. With this jump, the illegal confinement and abuse of Haley by Tony were exposed, and he was arrested by the police. Afterwards, I didn't pay any more attention to Haley and Tony's affairs, nor did it deserve my attention. Anyway, evildoers will face their own reckoning. End of the story.